Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. I am your host, Pat Flynn. I am joined once again by Dr. Gaven Kerr and Dr. Jim Madden for an Open Jam philosophy and live Q&A session. So, gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be joined by you two, as always. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for having us, man.
Yeah, before we get warmed up and start having some fun, let me make just a few brief announcements. The first is kind of boring but important. I just want to let everybody know that I'm going to be starting a separate YouTube channel. In fact, I've already started it. I'll post the link below for philosophy and theology content. Essentially, if you like these conversations of these episodes, you're going to want to subscribe to this YouTube channel. The reason I'm doing this is not because I want to, but because people have advised me consistently that having all sorts of different content on one channel is crushing me with the algorithm. So this content will still be on this channel for a while, just because I know a lot of people here are subscribed for that. But over time, there will probably be a transition. The new channel is called Philosophy for the People, because I couldn't think of a better name. And I put a link in the description. So if you guys want to subscribe to that, you can help me start building that up. I think I started putting up Jim, our Plato series is on there already. And nice. Gavin, I'm going to re-upload a bunch of our past conversations over there as well. So there'll be a good amount of content on there soon. It's thin now, but if you guys want to subscribe over there, I would super appreciate it. So that's my only boring announcement before we begin. Gavin and Jim, like I said, great to see you. Gavin, since it's been the longest time since you've been on the podcast, give us an update. What are you working on? What are you thinking about?
So I'm working on my classical theism book. The God section seems to be coming together. I was kind of, it's always when you're writing a book, you kind of know the issues, but you just need to know how to frame the issues in a strategic way to, get the checkmate on, who you're disagreeing with. So, and I was stuck for such a while on doing that with eternity, but I broke the back of that yesterday and today. So once I finished that treatment of eternity, the whole sort of, God section is going to jail, which is nice. And then I can move on to human nature, life after death, stuff like that.
Do you get into theories of time in classical theism book?
I do. Yes, I have to. I must do.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I know, because some theists tried, I think they try to skirt around it without committing to, say, an A theory or a B theory. Mm-hmm. Yeah, where do you land? Do you come out a presentist or an eternalist?
Well, I'm a full-blown Aristotelian. Time is the measurement of the before and after in a process of change, so piggybacks on the back of a change.
So yeah, you take the presentist position then?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, looking forward to reading that. That's going to be a monumental project, for sure. Yeah.
And other than that, I got my tattoo finished off.
So let's see it. Come on.
Colored in. Okay, so
the one you can show us.
Yeah. The one I can show us. Let's see. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Move it over.
There you go. There we go.
There we are. So it's all colored in and stuff. Yeah. So it's
good, Gavin.
That's awesome. The dragon. So that's my colored arm, and the other arm is just all black and gray and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you gonna get the other arm, the black and gray arm, colored in at some point or not?
I don't know. It's the black and gray arm is the religious arm. So do we want to introduce a bit of color into
I don't know.
religious?
I like the idea of the abstract archetypical over there, right?
Yeah. Right. This is it. Yeah. So, but anyway, the color is really cool. It hurt really badly, but anyway, 7 hours of getting your skin drilled into, by about the 5th hour, it starts to get a wee bit annoying.
That'll do it, I bet.
Yeah. Good
but,
stuff.
It was great.
So, all right, Jim, what about you? I mean, we just had a chat, but anything?
I think before close of business today, I will have a new blog post out, possibly a Substack too. I have to see if I have time to set that up. And it is called the Techno Apocalypse at the Orthodontist's Office. So look forward to that.
Right? You and your titles, man.
Yeah, I had a very, very interesting line of thought while in the lobby at an orthodontist appointment for my son yesterday. And I just about finished the paper on evolutionary psychology for an upcoming conference. And other than that, just training jiu-jitsu and chasing my kids around. Oh,
nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Living the life, the dream.
Yeah, Gavin, I know you got a million projects already, but we'll have to get you on the Substack train here. I've got got a few. I'm cranking away over there. I got a new post today trying to settle this argument about whether theism or atheism is a simpler theory. So,
Okay.
yeah. All right. Well, anything you guys want to chat about before we dive into questions here, or should we just start right away with the Q&A?
So, Jim, as you know, I've been working on intentional action, and Anscombe has been the big thinker here, and we know that McDowell was very impressed by Anscombe's account of intentional action as well. So it seems to me, and this is what I would be interested in your thoughts on this, McDowell sort of deploys the myth of the given when it comes to perceptual experience, such that if there's a genuine given, it's concept free, it's conceptually naked, and so it's unable to provide justifications for thought. It's just justifications but not exculpations. And my sort of thought was, can you run that the other way? If a la Davidson and the causalists, an intention is just some sort of cause of action, it's what brings about the action, but it's not identified with the form of the action itself. Is there a kind of myth of the given there, such that I'm not the one that acts, the intention causes me to act, so that if I'm asked, why did you act thus and so, I can only point to the intention as causing it, but I'm not the one that had any reason for acting. So an intention as cause, it kind of, in a way, deploys the myth of the given, but in the other direction, because it doesn't provide a reason for my acting. It just kind of pushes up against me, causes me to act. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I actually think, yes, I agree. Right. And I think this is all over Brandam's read of Hegel on intentional action from the phenomenology.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. And the idea that there could be an intentional act that isn't itself, has conceptual commitment tied into it, right?
Yeah.
And then it's I think this is part of how Brandam, and I've looked at this, for about a year. Brandam makes sense of some of these comments by Hegel, where Hegel will say, you don't even really know what the intention of your action is except like retrospectively. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's only then that you can put it in a space of reasons and understand what was really going on there. And that's why Hegel thinks you need other people to kind of let you know what the consequences of this thing were, which then lets you actually see what really happened and then thereby put it in a space of reasons. Right.
Right.
So I think there's much to be said for what you're saying there. Right. And also the myth of the given, and this is, it runs not just from the five senses, but from the senses, the Lockean senses of reflection too. We don't have an unmediated relationship to our internal contents any more than our external contents, right?
Yeah.
And so the intention is a human intention. It is relevant to the space of reasons only in as much as it's been conceptually worked up, right?
Yeah. That point about Hegel's interesting. This is sort of what I'm reading at the minute.
Nice.
Taylor, brilliant book on Hegel. I read Brandam's Marquette lecture that you recommended. That was a good one as well. Really helped me with some stuff on Hegel. And what struck me there is, it was interesting. You kind of know the intention retrospectively. Is it the case that when we're engaged in an intentional action that we haven't maybe pre-planned or anything like that? We get up and go, and we do, and this takes in the McDowell-Dreyfus dispute. Is it the case that we can know the intention as we're doing it, as it unfolds, even if we didn't think about it beforehand?
Yeah, I think that is kind of Brandam trying to split the difference in the McDowell-Dreyfus thing there, right? So it seems that I think so much is unfair to McDowell too. Okay, but the caricature of McDowell is that you don't know it while you're doing it, but after the fact you can just sort of retrospect, right?
Yeah.
And the caricature of Dreyfus is, there is no conceptual content to it. There's just these human acts that are non-conceptual acts, right?
Yeah.
And I think what Brandam's doing, and it's very intentional. So Hegel thinks this category of becoming, mediating between being and nothing, right, between universal and uncognized particular, right, is like the glue for everything, right? And so it's in the becoming, it's in the movement of the action that it gets conceptually worked up, right? But it was worked up conceptually while it was happening, even if it's only available to me in retrospect. It was, the real is the rational, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. The owl Minervus flies late, but it does fly that route. Okay. So retrospectively,
Yeah.
I'm seeing what was there all along
Mhm.
in its happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know that got all
Absolutely.
like spooky in German there, but
No, that's good. No, we can get spooky in German, which is great. We can even start speaking German if we were fluent.
yeah, if we were, yeah, you would probably leave me behind quickly on that, right?
Oh well, I don't know. It's been years since I used my German,
Right.
so
I
no,
can get it done reading with a dictionary, but man, no speaking. Right?
Yeah, which is unfortunate because sometimes you have to force yourself to read the German, but the English is so readily available. I get lazy sometimes and just use the English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get lazy 99% of the time.
No, that's cool. That's good. So that's good. I like the way you brought in the Hegel there. That's in the phenomenology, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Awesome.
And I think also in some pretty interesting moments in the Encyclopedia Logic.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which
Okay.
I, for my sins, decided to teach for the first time this semester.
And how did that go?
Well, no, so in my metaphysics class, we're doing 8 weeks on Aristotle's metaphysics.
Was that specifically assigned in the confessional, Jim? Just curious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. Damn you. You have it coming now. You will teach us. Yes, I'm doing 8 weeks on Aristotle's metaphysics, which is standard for my metaphysics course. I always do that. Right. And then I decided I would do Hegel's Science of Logic from the Encyclopedia for the second half of the course, which sounded so cool in July. But as October and midterm approaches and I have to start teaching that book, I'm like, what the hell have I done to myself? I had to go teach Hegel's Lesser Logic to a group of undergrads, right? So
yeah,
but we'll see. There might be some podcasting on it just so I can get some ideas.
Right. Yeah. Cool. All right, should we dive into some questions here, gentlemen?
Let's do it. And by the way, Gavin, if you write that up, I would love to see it and have a look at it.
Yeah. Well, there's a manuscript, sort of that a few individuals have had, cast their eye over. One of them is here with us. So I'll send that on to you. No problem. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. So our buddy Horseman says he'll be at the gym, but he dropped the question in mostly for Jim here, but I'm sure Gavin will have some thoughts. He wants to know, what are your thoughts on Stoicism, and was Pliny Q, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, radical hope, right? Native American, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Was radical hope a Stoic in his response to devastation of crows culture? And if so, Horsa wants to know, is Stoicism a reasonable response to modern times?
Man, so I don't know if Horseman was a student of mine at one point, or if he's listened to me on some other podcasts. That's interesting because he seems to be referring to, I take he's referring to a book called Radical Hope by Jonathan Lear, and a book I find deeply, deeply personally moving. Right.
So this is a pointed question.
Yeah, it's a pointed question. Yeah, it's a very good question. Okay, and Jonathan Lear, who's an interesting intellectual, a scholar of Aristotle, who then kind of dropped out for a while and became a psychoanalyst. Okay. He's a very sophisticated guy. And he's at the University of Chicago in the same unit with Robert Pippin. And when John Hagen was alive, those guys were all together. And he wrote this book called Radical Hope, which is about the last Crow Indian chief, Plenty Coups. Plenty Coop, I think it's Coops was his name. And this guy was this profoundly magnificent Crow warrior, but he was the one who led them onto the reservation, and they were sort of the last ones to go. Okay. And Plenty Coop was, he had a white friend who he had become very close to after he entered the reservation. And his friend thought he should write a biography of Plenty Coop, so he did an interview with him. And the day, he gives this very detailed account of his life, and then the first day he gets to the reservation, Plenty Coop says, and after that, nothing happened. Okay, nothing happened. And his friend is like, well, no, that's 30 years ago now, and plenty's happened. He said, well, I would have to ask you to tell me what has happened since then. Okay. And this idea that his ability to make sense of his life ended the day he got on the reservation. He was still alive, but his life didn't make sense anymore. Okay. Mm-hmm. And as Lear tells the story here, what Plenty Coop is shown to be this very, very interesting character in many ways, like beyond just his magnificence as a warrior. And to make a very long story short, I recommend this book highly to everyone. Is Plentycoop has this dream, okay, where God tells him to follow the way of the chickadee, okay, and like we'll get into this in a minute here, but on the one hand, Plentycoop is faced with basically Sitting Bull, who's saying, man, better dead, right? There's only one way we can be, and that's the way we've always been. And if times are changing, we have to die with it. Okay. It's like go out in a blaze of glory kind of thing. Although that wasn't really Sitting Bull, but he's that figure to Plentycoop. Okay. The other side is the complete accommodationist. It's like, well, hey, God could like make anything good. So just go with it, right? Just go ahead, move to the reservation, become white, take up their faith, all that, right? So on the one hand, you have, we couldn't have gotten God wrong in the past, right? So God couldn't do anything new. So if this is what way things are going, then it's just then the world has ended, right? And the other is, no, we can't get God wrong. So whatever happens, right? Okay. So on the one hand, you have like the sin of despair, and the other hand, you have the sin of presumption. Okay. And Plentycoops is told to go the way of the chickadee, which is to listen for new things. Okay. So what Plentycoop does is he enters the reservation and he listens for new things. And he ends up having this very moderate position on how to deal with white culture. And he ends up becoming a Christian, right, in a way. And he embraces education, but all along, like finding the distinctively Crow way to do this. Okay. And you can see what Lear's real game is here. Is like, we're all kind of Plentycoops now. Like we're at this moment of like the world we grew up in seems to be dying, right? And there's like, do we cling to it like in a Sitting Bull style, or do we just say, hey, let's just go with the times and anything can be made good, right? And what Lear's is like advocating is this kind of like perpetual advent, like listening, right, until something can show up for us, right, and see how to be us in this moment. Does that make sense? And so now, long question there. So is that Stoicism? I don't think that's Stoicism, because like the Stoic is like Plentycoop is engaged. He's worried about the world. He is worried about bringing the good about. It's not just about I'm going to control what I can control. It's like, no, I'm waiting for the chickadee, to hear the new thing that will bring my people forward in real practical progress. Okay. I know there's a caricature of Stoicism, but this is why I'm not a Stoic. I care about the good in this world.
Right.
I care about the good outside of me. Yeah.
That's a good distinction. I mean, speaking of Stoicism, I got my boy Seneca right here. And in fact, Stoicism, right, is of course, there's many different Stoics, and you read them, and
it's a big place.
They often sound very different. I mean, one of my favorite Stoic letters is in here. It's called God and Man. If you just crossed out the name, you would think that it was a Christian giving a treatise on the Holy Spirit, right? You literally would.
Yeah.
But what you bring up, Jim, is a really interesting point, right? It's like there's a lot about Stoic thought that is good and useful, but the Christian wants to take it further, right? It's like, yes, like how you react to things internally makes a difference, but we do have an obligation to interact with the world as well, right?
Yeah.
To try and make the world a better place, not just to change our reaction or how we feel about the world, right? Emotionally or whatever. That's good, right? That can be therapeutic psychologically, but we have a binding moral obligation to go and engage with the world, right? To wrestle with the evil and try and overcome it as well, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be careful because I don't want to caricature Stoicism, right? But I think a lot of the kind of big popular people you hear out there who say they're Stoics are not Stoics. They're actually Aristotelians. Okay.
Yeah.
Because they're very concerned about whooping ass, right? Okay. Right. And like what is Aristotle concerned about? He's about whoop ass. He's about winning, right? About becoming great. Do you see that? And I think that when you and this is in book 1 of the Ethics, it's very important. When you commit yourself to being great, okay, externally great, right? Like having effects, right? That means no man is happy until his deathbed and maybe after that. Right. Because it matters how things come out now. Like Aristotle says this is like, you could be rendered unhappy after your death because of the fate of your children. Right. So it's, to use Martha Nussbaum's phrase, goodness is very fragile now. It is very fragile because it's engaged with a world of becoming, right? Not just being. And it is subject to chance and fate and providence, or, you know, the demonic, what have you, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to commit yourself to actually being excellent and magnificent in terms of external effect, there is a kind of risk to that, right? And this is why I don't like the Stoic so much as a caricature, right? Mm-hmm. Is that there isn't that just commitment to like the risk and the danger of possibly being disappointed and thwarted by your own prospects, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why like I hear like the Jocko Willnicks of the world, they're not Stoics, they're Aristotelians.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know it, but they're Aristotelians. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Gavin, your thoughts?
Yeah. So I agree. It is a caricature of the Stoics, as you say, just to, you know, take them as being only concerned with how we react to things and being completely dispassionate and not showing any sort of passion in the face of anything. And obviously you know, the response to that is, well, that's inhuman. You know, we simply can't do it. It's trying to make us perfect humans by making us inhuman. I do agree with Jim that a lot of the Stoics these days, your Willnicks, your Joe Rogans, people like that, are really Aristotelians, because what they're striving after is virtue. And virtue isn't just some inner sort of state. Virtue is a kind of mode of presence in the world, an activity in the world, and it's activity in accord with right reason. So we need to train ourselves to act reasonably in the world, and part of that means taking on the challenges of the world and taking on the evils of the world, which we can't do if, you know, if we're not strong, if we're not healthy, and if we're not intelligent and sober about things. There's a kind of passivity to Stoicism that I don't like, where you kind of just have to take what's given to you and, you know, control your reactions to it. And I don't like that. I don't like being passive.
I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's one of those, you see this Star Wars meme that goes around?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the captions. The reason I bring this up is this was shared on a Stoic page, and I criticize it on Instagram because it's something bad, something beyond my control is happening. And then what's her name? Padme says, it upsets you, right? And Anakin's just looking there. It says Stoics. And she's like, it upsets you, right? And this isn't virtuous, right? Certain things should upset you, right? Mm-hmm. They should. And that's exactly to your point. Now, again, this is kind of a cartoon of Stoicism. This is just pop level people who have like, Stoic Instagram pages, right? Who probably have never read many actual Stoics, right? But if that's what you mean by Stoicism, I want nothing to do with it, right? Like if my child dies and I'm not upset, that's vicious. There's something wrong with me at that point, right? Mm-hmm.
Or if you're not happy to see your wife, if you're not attracted to your spouse, and vice versa. I mean, these are all very human things, and they promote human excellence. But the sort of Stoicism, which is that passivity to not get excited about anything, it just seems to me inhuman. It's not conducive to human flourishing.
Right.
And I want to go like maybe a little nastier in my criticism here is, and once again, of the pop version of it. Okay.
And it's not all pop version. I mean, some Stoics really do.
Yeah, some will say that.
Right,
yeah. But I see it as a kind of dodge, right? I mean, like if I don't really love anything, then I can't really be harmed, right? So love is like really freaking risky. Okay. Do you know what I mean? Because I'll admit, man, if I go home and Jennifer is in a pool of blood, my life is over. It's bad. It's really bad. And there's no internal act of will that's going to change that.
Yeah.
Did you see what I mean? And so I'm by committing myself and like hooking my fate to something external to me, like my wife, I'm taking this like incredible risk, right? And admitting that, like, no, you could ruin me inside and out by ruining her. That's this risk, right? And it takes real guts to do that, right? And I think in a lot of ways in the pop Stoic, what we're doing is we're playing defense. We don't actually want to be committed to anything, right? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're saying as long as I have the internal state right and nothing can flap me, I can't be harmed, right? That's like to live in a safe space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? I mean, and I'm not. By the way, I'm not saying like Jocko Willink is dodgy. I just think he's, if he even says he's a Stoic, right? I hear people say this, but please, Jocko, please. but
I haven't heard about him. When he says discipline equals freedom, I mean, that's Aristotelian, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's Aristotelian. It's Aristotelian. Yeah. And because I think that man's committed to things and he would die over them. And if it didn't go the right way, it would bother him very deeply. And that's good. That's good. Yeah.
Right. Excellent. Good question. And thanks for all the background there, Jim.
And, yeah, you bet. And by the way, this is my critique of Kant's ethics. Like, there's no, like, if you just will the right thing, you can't lose, right? It's like Nietzsche's right on this. He's absolutely right on this critique. It's like a way to make sure I'm insulated from tragedy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Andrew says, going back to McIntyre, so he is not inherently against using rights talks, just so long as it ties to the good. Is it true also that our modern notion of human dignity is alien to Aquinas? All right, who wants to take the first whack at that?
I'll go with the McIntyre side there.
Yeah, I think this is a follow-up from our last one.
Yeah.
Jim.
I mean, there's a paper McIntyre has on rights, and I haven't looked at it for a lot of years, but it's pretty hardcore. He does not like talk of rights. Okay, that's true. But I think a McIntyre, I don't know what McIntyre himself would say, but I think one could be in his broadly sort of Aristotelian communitarian vein and say, yeah, rights talk is useful, right? As long as we understand it, it is not grounded in some kind of pure reason. It's grounded ultimately in like the concrete realities of human nature and what is actually good for the human being as a kind of animal, right? And given the kind of metaphysical constitution we have, et cetera, right? So I think you could be in that McIntyrean camp, I think I am, and think rights talk is all well and good, but just to understand that the meta-ethical account of it is going to be very different than what, say, you're going to find in, John Rawls or Immanuel Kant, right? Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or even John Locke, right?
Yeah. And yeah, Gavin, anything you want to add to that, or notions of Aquinas on human dignity?
Yeah, I'll take the Aquinas side of things. So, do you want to just pull the question back up there?
Yeah, he wants to know: is it true that our modern notion of human dignity is alien to Aquinas?
Well, the writers of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights certainly didn't think it was alien to Aquinas, because both Maritain and
Maritain is a significant figure there. He's a Thomist, right?
I mean, the two of them are
McIntyre does get after Maritain on that. He's not entirely happy. Yeah.
So, I mean, in Aquinas, I mean, our modern conception of human dignity, Universal Declaration, every human is born free, equal in dignity. They're born with dignity. They come into the world with dignity. They don't have it. It's not added to them when they're born. So it's not just because they become members of a state or some sort of civil society that the state, grants them dignity. They have it in virtue of what they are, because in being born, they are the kind of thing that has dignity. So they're a human being and thus have dignity. And certainly you get a notion of that in Aquinas, because, a person is, unique, rational substance and self-possession and all the rest. I think what our modern notion of dignity has added, which I don't think Aquinas needed to add, but is certainly consistent with his thinking, is that a person is to be treated as an end in itself, as a subjective value. Any attempt to instrumentalize a person for one's own good, and not simply to value the person for the good that he or she is to fail to treat the person as a person. Now, I think you get that in Aquinas, but I don't think he really needs to articulate that, because whenever dignity comes up, it's the image and likeness of God business. Yeah. Which really is just recognizing that a person is an end in itself, because if we are in the image and likeness of God, and God is our ultimate good and true end, then we are goods in ourselves to be valued for ourselves and not at the expense of any other goods. But I think, obviously the thinker who, is key in all of in our modern notion of dignity, of recognizing persons as ends in themselves, is, funnily enough, Kant.
Yeah.
And his second articulation of the categorical imperative, always act in such a way that you treat humanity as an end and never as a means. And
this is another case of Gavin and mine kind of tortured relationship to Kant, right?
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I think this is Kant's, tortured relationship to modernity.
With the real, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. He just gets this ambivalent attitude towards reality, and he's trying so hard to be, I don't know, an Aristotelian or some kind of, Aristotelian spirit. Yeah, go on.
Do you mind if I say a couple things on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've actually just came up in my Plato lecture this morning, and we were doing book 5. And please, gentle listeners, tune in to the Plato lecture, the Plato discussions we're going to have on here. But it's interesting, you know, there is no place for the individual in the Republic, right? I mean, and in fact, it's the way I read it. It's an assault on the individual. Like, it's all about the whole and not about the part. It's all about the ideal, not the concrete. Okay. And in a lot of ways, I think what we're seeing in Western philosophy is this long kind of recovery from that, right? Okay. And by the time you get to Kant, right, there is this sense that, no, there's a person that is not just a part of a whole. Okay. But you don't get to that point if you don't have the sort of rehabilitation of Aristotelianism in the medieval university, right, which is very interested in the concrete in a way that the Platonism is not, right? Okay. And one of the is, I wish people would quit teaching Kant's groundwork and instead actually teach the second critique. Okay?
Yeah.
Because there's all these people running around saying Kant says happiness has nothing to do with ethics, right? Kant says the good has nothing to do with ethics. That's not true, right? Like, the fundamental problem, one of the fundamental problems of the second critique is it's unthinkable to Kant that reason could on one hand tell you to do what is right, and the other hand also tell you that you should pursue what is best for yourself. So now you have this like rift inside of reason that can't be done. So he says there must be an ultimate synthesis of this where the right is the good. Yeah. He's aware of this problem. He's aware of this problem, right? And the institution I teach at, because we're a very serious Catholic school, a lot of the students have kind of been told by people that Kant's this really bad guy, right? Yeah. And then I'll show them like Karl Wojtyła saying, "Oh, hey, his second formulation categorical pair is the way to go," right? And one of the most profound things that helped me like kind of come around to some of this stuff is from Charles Taylor. You held his book up earlier, where in one of his early, it's a lecture he gave. He says the great embarrassment to Christianity is it took the Enlightenment to tell us what our own doctrine means, right? Yes. Yeah. And the great embarrassment to the Enlightenment is it takes Christianity to tell you why anybody should care about that, right? And so I do think we need that notion of person, and it probably wasn't really fully 100% articulated in the way that at least we understand it now until Kant, right? Yeah. But I think it's implicit. It's implicit from Aristotle's reaction to Plato. All the way through the medievals into the early modern period. And
certainly I would say the best articulation is among the Thomistic personalists. I mean, you brought up JP2, right? And Jacques Maritain. I would say Norris Clark, his essay, Person and Being in St. Thomas, is phenomenal. Yes. And what he argues in the essay is like, this isn't explicit in St. Thomas, but all the seeds are there. All the seeds. And then he just makes it explicit, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Which is interesting because that's the account of human dignity, which runs throughout the human rights documents, the Universal Declaration, then ratified in the European Convention. That's the account of dignity in place. But I suppose, for those of us who are interested in jurisprudence and political philosophy, that's not the account of dignity, which is being interpreted in those documents. The account of dignity is that the state will give you dignity, that you're dignified because the state brings you, within the context of legal entitlements. So it's only if you're born that you have dignity and are recognized to have dignity. And we all know where that leads.
If you pass through a certain physical structure, there's like this spell of dignity that comes on you, right? Is that the theory?
Yeah, this is it. Yeah. So then you're a member of a state, and the state, grants you dignity, and that's how you get your dignity. But you don't have dignity in virtue of being a human. It's only human dignity insofar as it's given only to humans.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Good stuff. Good questions, everybody. As always, appreciate it. Harry has a question. Philosophically and theologically, here's a light question. How would you answer the question, what is the meaning of life? Tolkien said it was to increase our knowledge of God by all means that we have. Well, Tolkien was a Catholic, so.
Yeah. Could I maybe jump in on this one?
Yeah, I'm. You guys are the guests here, so I'm going to let you do most of the talking. People hear me yap enough. I'll add a little bit of commentary, but you guys, please.
So I think the meaning of life is tied up with what the end of life is. So, and I don't mean the end as in death. I mean the goal of life. The good for man. What is man's ultimate good? And I think that man's ultimate good has to be some sort of rational good, because man's a rational animal. We can't sort of enjoy the good in a non-rational animalistic way. So it can't be a purely animalistic or a purely rationalistic enjoyment of the good. It has to be the enjoyment of the good as a rational animal. And I take that to be happiness. To enjoy the good as a rational animal is to be happy, to be in a state of happiness. And the only way in which we can attain that is through coming to enjoy God as he is in himself. So the meaning of life is to live life in such a way that when we come to die, we will not die, but we'll live with God. And so it's to do whatever it is in our lives that we can do to draw ourselves closer to God, so that at death we're already in close proximity to God. And so it's similar to what Tolkien says, in whatever way and whatever means to come to know God.
Sweet. Jim, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll say I've wrestled with this question like in a good way the last couple of years, because it struck me, especially as I got into middle age, that if I've used this example before. If I woke up tomorrow and but I was given like the angel Gabriel paradoxically showed up and said, "Guess what? Sorry, dude. The whole God thing. You're wrong. There's no God, right? There's no soul. All these metaphysical things that that you've hung your hat on. You're completely off. Okay. I'm not sure that would then like render my life meaningless, right? Like I think I would still love Jen, right? I would still love my kids, right? You know what I mean? I don't think the things that I really love in my life are predicated on that metaphysic. Do you see what I mean? Okay.
Right, but are they?
Yeah.
We talked about this before, though,
Yeah.
and this seems to be a part where we diverge, right? But
Yeah.
are they made more substantial and intelligible because of the metaphysics, right?
Well, so the thing is, I don't know that. The thing is, I don't think they have to be made more intelligible for them to be sufficient for a meaningful life, right? I agree with you; they are, right? But I don't know that that's a necessary condition for having a meaningful life, right? Because I think they're not intelligible to plenty of people, right? And so here's how I've come to think about it: is certainly the Greeks, whether it's Plato or Aristotle, they see like the point of life. I mean, in Plato, Aristotle actually uses it in this form, is to immortalize yourself. It's to bring yourself, the form of you, to embody the very form of the deity itself, right? Being itself, right? And like the more you're formed that way, the more you are divinized, and like it's this sort of like divinization through theory, right? Okay. And I'm going to get really big here. Sorry. Okay. And so, but then like St. John shows up, right? Okay. And he says like that logos, that form that we're supposed to be conforming ourselves to as good Greeks, right? It showed up here and it like pitched a tent, right? And it was meat and we ate it and all that. Okay. It's the same thing though. Like you're going to be like you will be free. You'll be saved by the truth. Okay. But what the truth is for St. John is it's love, right? Do you see what I mean? And so it's that same Greek story for me, or it's the same idea that like what it is to immortalize, right, is to align yourself with the fundamental like structure of the universe, right? Mm-hmm. But it turns out like there's something about that fundamental structure of the universe that didn't occur at all to Plato, right? It doesn't really occur to Aristotle, right? It's love, right? And love comes to me in these very particular relationships that I have with these other human beings, okay? So I see those particular relationships as the meaning of my life, okay? Right. But by revelation, by what John has told me, it turns out that those two are reflective of the structure of being itself in a way that would have never occurred to the Greek philosopher. Right. So I'm not going to say to have a good life is to be a philosopher. Okay.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. To have a good life is to love. Now it turns out that the best way to be a good philosopher is to love. Right.
Yeah. So let's unpack this a little bit, because actually Harry has another question. It's going to open up a huge can of worms. But we're gonna that's what we do here. He wants to know: is it true that atheism cannot properly account for objective morality? We'll weave into that.
Can I maybe push back a wee bit?
Yeah,
with
please
Jim?
do. Yeah,
I want to push back too. We're going to do a pile. We're going to do a pile on here, right? Because the one thing, just one quick thing I want to say, Jim, is that there's a deep compatibility there, at least what you're talking about. And coming from a skeptical perspective, I want to say that, yeah, you're right. A lot of people aren't making explicit the things that we're making explicit, but they're also not making explicit a reductive physicalism or an eliminativism with respect to love either, right? And I think once that enters the scene, it does radically change a paradigm, right? If I think that this sort of folk notion or everyday common sense of the love I have between me and my daughter Marin, my common intuition here is that there's something real, there's something binding, there's something objective. And if I have adopted a worldview that doesn't give any grounding to this, but says that this is some type of illusion fobbed off on me by certain chemical processes in my brain, right? That radically alters things for me in the sense that I don't see much of a meaningful life in living in some type of fantastic illusion, right? It would be almost impossible for me to feel a sense of deep meaning anymore if I were convinced that paradigm were true, which I obviously am convinced that it's not true, that it's false. So let me get Gaven in here.
I just don't see how that's all an objection to what I just said.
I don't think it is. It's just a qualification or an addition, right?
So, but I don't think you'd have to go through the sort of like, dialectical procedure of refuting these eliminativist views in order to actually have the love, right? And I think the people who claim this are living at for the most part, my experience of them, at like performative contradiction to what they're saying, right?
Of course.
You know what I mean? I think they mostly don't live meaningless lives. Right? They live lives full of meaning. Right. They're just bullshitting when they say they
think it's meaningful to convince other people of eliminativism and all of this other crap. So, but yeah, Gaven, I'm sorry to interject, but yeah, come on in.
So I'm kind of going to sort of sketch, a bit of position, and I'll just be interested to see what you think of it, Jim, just to see where the lay of the land is. So I think Plato and Aristotle were aware of what we Christians call original sin.
I think definitely, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, they're aware that there's just something lacking in humans.
Yeah, this desire to always do better than the next guy and stuff like that. Yeah.
There's something that we could be, and we're not able to get there. And for them, philosophy will get us there. Theorizing something like that will get us there.
Divine science.
Yeah, but the thing is, for them, it's just if we try really hard. And pursue, some kind of, course of action, that'll get us to where we need to get. But it seems to me that if we recognize the reality of original sin, it's not in our trying really hard that we can overcome that. We can't overcome that. Right. We just can't. It's that, God has to come and find us. It's not in the form of the good or self-thinking thought or anything like that we'll be perfected, even if we were to find that. The form of the good has to come and find us, because it's not the form of the good which is lost or hidden, even though for Plato it is. It's outside the cave and all that. We are lost and hidden in the caves of our own hearts, of our own sin. Yeah. And, God is a person that has to come and find us. And only whenever that happens is the prospect of a whole human life possible. The kind of life that Aristotle in the Ethics traces out the foundational dispositions for. And so we all agree, the three of us here are married, we've got children, we all agree that they are essential to a meaningful life. But it seems to me that they're essential to a meaningful life precisely because they are all ways in which the divinity has come to meet us and entered our hearts and made right what was crooked through sin, because it's in our spouses, in our children.
100%. Yeah.
And that is so true. Right.
It seems to me that that even for those, and the question of objective morality and God is going to come up, but even for those who don't recognize God's existence, they recognize that precisely because what they have is a participation in that kind of sanctifying relationship which God gives us, in our relations between our spouses. Because it's let's say, in marriage, it's not that God is perfecting me within the marriage, which he is. It's rather my spouse is perfecting me by holding me to a standard, which is the standard of the marriage that we have between ourselves. And I incidentally are perfecting her, because we're held to the standard of something, objective between the both of us. So God, in coming to meet the two of us, brings us to perfection and makes our lives meaningful. And without that, let's say, if it's some sort of ancient Greek marriage, close and, all that, Aristotle was to his wife and everything, and seemed to be a very wholesome relationship, there doesn't appear to be that grace-filled relationship of the total self-giving of one for the other that you do find after the advent of Christianity.
I know. I think this is what I'm saying, though. is that for me, the meaning of life isn't something that I access through philosophy in that classical Greek sense, right? I access it through like the incarnation of divinity in the particular people and places and things around me that I have this sort of like mysterious loving relationship to. Do you see my point? Right. Mm-hmm. Right. My point was to say, look, I don't think I need classical theism at the forefront of my mind then to have a meaningful life. Right. Even though I am a classical theist, right? If you ask me to give an account of why my life is meaningful, yeah, I'm going to need that. But I don't think you need to give the account of why your life is meaningful for it to be meaningful.
Is that a difference in, let's say, a performative difference, such that you don't always have to be, in my relationship with my wife, day in, day out, I don't always have to be thinking that, okay, right, this is Christ-centered, this is the presence of God in my life. Yeah. It's enough that it's the sacrament and it's there, and
it's Dreyfus McDowell.
Yeah. So,
right? It doesn't have to be made explicit for it to be there. Now, I agree, it can be made explicit, right?
Yeah.
And it might, you know what I mean? But it's there. It's there, right?
One other distinction I wanted to maybe make it to see if it, tracks on to what you're saying is, if the angel Gabriel came and, just says all this classical theism, it's all wrong, and you said, well, my life still would be meaningful because, let's say, the relationship to the spouse or whatever. Can we distinguish between the life being meaningful and the life not being a waste of time? I would certainly want to say that my life, if classical theism is false and all of that, it's certainly not time wasted.
No, it's not. Yeah.
But it would, I guess I would want to say there would definitely be a significant loss of meaning there. If it turned out, if the angel Gabriel appeared and said all that. Now, thankfully, that's not the case.
Yeah, who's imparting essay to you, angel Gabriel? Let me tell you, right?
Yeah.
I would want to make that distinction between something being meaningful and something being a waste of time.
And I think that's a good distinction, just between like an objective, like independent of our minds, meaning, purpose to the universe, right? And a sort of subjective, well, I still feel like here I am. I have all this sense of meaning, right? What grounds that, what supports it, who knows? But to me, the sense is here, so it's not a waste of time, right? Yeah.
Maybe we're equivocating on meaning. It seems like what you guys are saying by meaning is something like it's got a final cause. It's got some like resting place it's going to, right?
Yeah.
And let's just say it turns out like the rest, like the point of it isn't anything external to it, right? I don't see why that would devalue it. If it just turns out like these goods in my life that we would say, like the three of us as like Catholics would say, these loving goods in my life are both intrinsic and extrinsically good, right? They're good in and of themselves, and they're also good in that they achieve this other final cause external to temporal existence, right? If you chopped off that other final cause that's external to temporal existence, right? That doesn't detract from these goods still being intrinsically good.
I'm thinking I'm going to say that it does, because insofar as they're not per se good, they're only good, through participation. They're not good in themselves. It does take away their significance and their value, in the same way as run it the other way. We don't exist per se. We only exist through participation. So if you take away that in which we participate,
but that's to say, then let's go to our argument for classical theism, right? But let's just suppose like counter possible, right? yeah, it turns out there's something in there I can't get it. It's just wrong. I don't have that available, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that, like, I mean, I don't think that detracts from the intrinsic goodness of my marriage and my children and the art that I look at and things like that.
Well, I mean, okay.
Does it have to point to something beyond itself for it to be intrinsically valuable, right?
Let's run the argument, from the efficient causality and see it as applying to the final causality. If you take away, so we'll argue that if you take away the primary cause, then things which have existence, they just wouldn't exist. So counterfactually,
but counterpossibly,
counterpossibly, that's just not a possible state of affairs. So run it the other way. If you take away the ultimate final cause, individual goods which aren't per se goods wouldn't have any sort of goodness to them because they would have no ultimate good in which they participate in order to be good. So you take away that final cause, then all those things lose their intrinsic goodness.
But couldn't you go book one of the ethics and just say, hey, what the good life is this proper balance among these intrinsic goods?
I would want to say that they lose their intrinsic goodness if they don't have an ultimate good to participate in.
Yeah, but the ultimate good would then be the life, right? That they constitute in their proper balance.
I don't think you would have a basis for saying that there's any sort of objective account of what a good life is.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying like you don't need something like philosophy and even natural theology to give that objective basis for it, right? What I'm just saying is it's your ability to give that story about the objective basis is not a necessary condition of it being a good life.
I would want to say, counter possibly, I don't think the situation is intelligible, and so I wouldn't want to say that it's a meaningful life. I want to say it's a life not wasted.
Yeah, that's I'm sort of stuck on this because I want to say it's so hard for me to entertain that without constantly searching out its intelligible grounding, right? And I can't do it apart from the deeper metaphysics and classical. But
I'm not sure what you guys mean by
I do recognize and see what I do recognize the point you're emphasizing here, Jim, but I also see what Gavin's saying. To me, also, there's just the perspective shift on all this would be significant too, right? So Angel Gabriel comes, gives us this not so great news, right? But we are bound up, right, with particular longings that now have been told to me are longings for ultimate frustrations, right, rather than ultimate satisfactions, right, that are bound up in the nature of who we are. So that's a significant changer too, and part of that longing is some type of eternal communion, not with the transcendent, but with those that I love most deeply, right? Perfect justice, love, home, all of these things. Now I have to believe that those longings are pointed at an impossibility under this situation. Now, how does that not radically kind of affect everything else in relation to that at that point?
Yeah,
right?
no, but does that mean your life is meaningless? That there's, I guess I don't quite know what you guys mean by having a meaningful life, right? I mean, it seems like you're baking into it. To have a meaningful life means it serves some final cause beyond this life, which I think is begging the question.
Right.
Well, maybe if I could put it in a different way, we talked about our kind of.
We'll spend 2 more minutes on this because there's a lot of questions, and we'll keep moving on. Right? Yeah.
Okay. We talked about our ambivalent relationship to Kant, and let's say we take the first critique, and there's so much good stuff in there, but there's so much stuff I think you just have to reject from that first critique. Now, we'll be reading over that and over it again and everything, and we'll be including it in articles, and then we'll be kind of saying, and this is why this is problematic in Kant, and we can't accept it. Now, in a sense, it's not a waste of time. Definitely not a waste of time to read Kant's first critique. So it's time well spent, but it certainly doesn't. It's not meaningful because you've gone through it just to reject it and get rid of it. So you haven't wasted your time, but at the same time, you haven't garnered anything meaningful from it.
Yeah, I guess I don't. Isn't the act of mastering that difficult text and like eliminating all the dead ends and having learned so much from it, even though it's not the conclusion you're looking for, I guess that seems to me to be a very valuable, very meaningful exercise to go on, right? I'm not saying I wouldn't be disappointed to have an atheism announced to me by an angel tomorrow. Okay. Right. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying my life wouldn't be better or more meaningful. I'm just saying, I think for apologetic reasons, this is bad when we you make it sound like unless you're a classical theist, you're just a nihilist and your life, you should jump off a bridge. I just don't see it.
I see the point you're making, Jim. I would just say that it just is unintelligible apart from the good as unparticipated to make sense of those intrinsic goods that you're talking about. So it's always going to remain, I think, for me, a thought experiment that is always just going to send me in circles thinking about it, right? Because I'm going to be coming back to an analysis of what the good actually is, even in these. And I agree with you. That those things are good, but they're good in as much as they're participating in some degree in the Godhead, in the uncreated good, right? Yeah. And I think that's the only way for us to really ultimately intelligibly ground why those things are good, right? So let's turn to this. Yeah, say you get the last word on this, unless Gavin really wants to say something else, and we'll move on.
No. He's a higher belt in jiu-jitsu than me, so he gets the last word. So.
Yeah, but what if we're doing kung fu, Gavin?
Oh well, we'll see.
Right. I can't kick. And so I guess if you want to wrap, even if you think you have to not just have classical theism, but you have to have immortality built into this in order to have a meaningful life. Well, then you just excluded Aristotle. He doesn't think you're individually immortal, right? And you're not going to come to ultimate perfection for Aristotle. You're just going to get ever closer to it, ever closer to it, ever closer to it, and then you'll snuff it someday and you're done, right? And so I would worry that and this is kind of one of the things that moved me to this is it seems like, and this is snotty, I don't mean that you're my friends, but it seems like you guys are making Aristotle a nihilist now too. Right.
Well, maybe there's debate on Aristotle and immortality of the soul. Right?
Well, we said we would give Jim the final word. So.
All right. Jim gets the final word there. We'll pick this up in another. Us two, we'll jam it out, and then we'll. This is a good. I love this conversation though, but let's tie it into this because I think it's relevant to Harry's question. Is it true that atheism cannot properly account for objective morality? But can I have the first word on this one? It's for fun, right? It depends on your flavor of atheism, right? There are many atheists out there who are happy to say that they are nihilists, who want to say that an objective moral structure is incompatible with atheism. So, like a Rosenberg or even the old atheists, right? Many of them are just like, look, if our ontology is this, we don't get this moral structure from that, right? So whatever else the moral structure is, it's got to be something that we invent, not discover, right? Many atheists say that. However, there's other atheists atheism is a huge tent, right, of different thinkers, right? You have atheistic Platonists, which I call these exotic atheisms, right? That you have atheistic Aristotelians. They're rare. They're very rare, but they're out there, right? Who want to essentially have an essentialist teleological worldview and say that this is enough to give us a sort of virtue ethics type of thing. In fact, that's Graham Oppy's view. Graham Oppy he's not I don't want to say he's a full-blooded Aristotelian, but he holds to a sort of virtue. He's friendly to virtue ethics, for example, right? So I just wanted to make it very clear that atheists disagree on this, right? This isn't just something that theists and atheists disagree about. This is a tension within atheists.
That's atheism, right? Yeah.
Right.
It's not even this thing that's Thomism, right?
Now the question is, even among those atheists, who is right? So it's not just a theist-atheist debate, right? So I just wanted to set the stage with that. I have my own responses and answers to this ultimately, but who wants to take this one first?
I suppose I would say. An atheist can recognize and accept final causality, and in accepting final causality can implicitly affirm, or if pushed, ought to implicitly affirm a final cause. They may not do so, but that would be a problem for their metaphysics. It wouldn't be a problem for their morality. So if they do recognize finality and final causality, I think you can build an objective morality out of that, as Aristotle does in the Ethics. And if they deny, some sort of primary final cause, Well, that's just a problem for their metaphysics. It just means that there's a bit of an inconsistency there in the system as a whole, but it's not a problem for the morality. So yeah, I mean, they can account for objective morality if they do have some form of Aristotelianism. Can they properly account for it? Well, what does properly mean within the whole system, the metaphysics included?
Can they make it fully intelligible? Right. Yeah.
Well, if the metaphysics isn't in place there, then no. But set the metaphysics aside, then the morality, which I think a lot of, when this question is asked, it usually is just to do with the morality. I think, yes, they can have a consistent objective morality.
Right. And so I would just say exactly what you said.
Wasn't this my point about meaning?
Well, that's why I thought it would tie in here, right? Yeah. So I want to say, like, look, if you are an Aristotelian naturalist, right, you can go a long way. And I've said this before in other podcasts, right? Like, you can go a long way in moral reasoning. You can anchor a lot of moral discourse in that general scheme. But to make that scheme intelligible, I think you need to be a theist at the end of the day, right? So it's like, what's going to undergird all of that? What's going to make sense of essentialism? What's going to make sense of teleology? What's going to make sense of participated goods, right? And all three of us are on agreement on this, even if we entertain different answers to hypotheticals, right? That to support the whole system that's needed for a robust objective morality, to make that fully intelligible, to bear that out, that's when you're going to need the uncreated good, ipsum esse subsistens, all that, right?
And so I think this is kind of going back to what I said earlier, is this, there's a distinction in this question to be made, right? Can the atheist properly account for objective morality? That's a different question from, can the atheist live by an objective morality? Right.
Agreed.
Okay. Right. This is my point earlier. Like, can an atheist account for the meaningful life? No. Right. Can they live a meaningful life?
Right.
Quite possibly,
but I do push back on this a little bit, not to what you're saying, but in general, it's like, however, if it's true that we have not just horizontal obligations, but vertical obligations, and we have obligations to God, right? And we are, in some sense, I'm not saying that God punishes involuntary unbelief or something like that. However, if that is part of our moral obligation of objective morality, and that's not in place for certain people, there is a failing there, and it might be a really significant failing, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Now, and also another distinction I want to make in this question is, like, what do you mean by objective morality? If you mean something like what Kant means by objective morality, I think you need to be a theist. Okay, right, pretty clearly, right? And you're not going to get very far, as Kant says, right? I mean, Kant's whole morality is a great big argument for theism, right?
Yeah.
People miss this in Kant, right? If what you mean is something like an Aristotelian theological ethic, now when you call it morality an ethic, once again, I think there's more latitude for various kinds of naturalism there, right?
Yeah.
But once again, if you're asking for the account, not for the practice, right? The account, I'm going to say, even the Aristotelian story, you got to have an unmoved mover, which all things are attracted to, right, by their love for it as the objective ground of everything, to make sense of the universe, and that includes the ethics too, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think this is okay. I think you need the theism to give the account, right, but not the practice. Yeah.
Right. Good. And hopefully, any atheists listening, which we always welcome, will find that we gave a fair summary of the different fleet. I mean, there's many, like other atheists, I think that, like Michael Huemer, atheist, he strongly wants to argue for objective morality as an atheist, right? But then Alex Rosenberg, he's like, he's very sharp with saying, like, atheists, you're also sentimentalists. Come join me in my nihilism, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a theist-atheist debate. This is a debate that goes on among atheists.
Among atheists,
right? Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, next one comes from Catholic Base. He says, how do you feel about the absolute primacy of Christ? And if possible, could you engage with Duns Scotus's critique of Thomistic free will as flawed with regards to his work on divine voluntarism?
This goes above my scholastic pay grade, so I'm going to kick this to...
So, okay. The absolute primacy of Christ, I'm not too sure what the context of that is. That sounds like a particular debate or discussion, but I mean, the absolute primacy of Christ in the spiritual life, and the moral life, and in the life of the philosopher.
Catholic, if you clarify quickly in the comments, I'll pull it up. Give some
As
more
a
context
Catholic, sure. I mean, you know, Christ has to be the absolute center of everything, because it's through Christ where, you know, God comes to meet us. And so, as we were talking about earlier, you know, in the meaningful life, you know, God comes out to meet us and makes our lives whole, and it's through Christ that occurs. So Christ has to occupy that place front and center in this life. And then, you know, with the beatific vision, it's, you know, the Blessed Trinity. Engage as to why Duns Scotus' critique of Thomistic free will is flawed in regard to his work of divine voluntarism. Can I recommend a book on that, as opposed to going through that whole debate?
That would be, look, I punted too, so I can't, right? That's a long story, right?
If you can see this, Thomas Osborne, Human Action in Aquinas, Scotus, and Occam. It's an excellent book. It's quite detailed and in depth. I've been taking a lot of notes in it, and he does engage with this issue. And I have been taking notes on this issue, but I mean, you know, when you're reading stuff, you know, there's some stuff you're more focused on. The other stuff, you just know that that's there if you need to return to it. This issue is dealt with in that book by Thomas Osborne. It's with QnA, okay? So it's Human Action in Aquinas, Scotus, and Occam. You'll get some good material in there, and Osborne seems sympathetic to the Thomist position as opposed to the Scotistic and even the Occamist position. So yeah, I'm just going to recommend that.
Good resource to have. Octus says, do you guys believe symbolic logic is, quote, reasoning in any sense? I recall in Scott Sullivan's traditional logic book that he remarked that modern logic is an abstract game of symbol manipulation. Jim, I think you recommended that book not too long ago. Is that right?
I think it's a, so for instance, Kreeft and Hauser, I think are very, very, very good, like kind of like, especially Hauser, like the Cadillac introductions to classical logic, right? But they're pretty big and unwieldy, right? Whereas Sullivan's book it's a lot leaner, and so it's more likely, I think, someone who outside of a classroom is going to sit down and work their way through, right? So I think I haven't used Hauser. I've read Hauser's book though. I haven't used it in a classroom. I've used all those books; they're all great. Sullivan's is particularly good, I thought, on the existential commitment debate and looking at first and second intention and all that. I thought it was a very good, concise presentation of some very, very complicated stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'll say this is, you know, in Sullivan's book, man, like modern logic is like, he's got a very, very low view of it, right? And I think it's something to have a low view of at some level, right? But also, you know, I mean, like a lot, I'll say this, you know, a lot, so modern logic is extensional, right? It is designed to work out where we don't make a meaning reference distinction anymore, right? It's designed to fit basically Aquinean metaphysic, okay? And so I'll say this in a sense to Nero's question here. Yes, modern logic, as its designers have intended it, is to reason really about nothing at all, right? It's basically all just to group things into sets, which is different from reasoning. Okay. Right.
It's certainly different from reasoning in the classical sense.
Yes. Okay. But that doesn't mean it can't be used to reason, right? I mean, like there's wiggle to how we interpret this, right? Yeah. Mm. Though I do think I have burnt far too much of my life on modern logic. So
good. Yep. So Jim, Gavin, go ahead and put your remarks in, then I'll.
No, you finish up with Jim, and then I can come in.
No, I was just going to say, Jim, you know, we have a number of obviously like philosophical enthusiasts here. For somebody who isn't necessarily interested in being a professional philosopher, how far do you think they have to go in studying modern logic?
Not very far at all.
Go? Yeah,
not very far at all.
Just stick with classical logic.
I mean, I think basically everything that's really, really super worth reading in philosophy was written before the advent of modern logic, right? Yeah. I mean, like Leibniz is a borderline case, right? But I think you could be better educated than most philosophy professors and never study any modern logic at all, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. So just to come in, first of all, Pat, I just see that Catholic Based just clarified.
Okay, let me pull that up. Yep.
I have a very quick answer to it, and then I can speak to this logic issue.
Is this the one, the Doctrine,
the Franciscan
school? Okay.
One.
Okay.
So Catholic based. I'm a Dominican, so obviously I disagree with Franciscan school. So this is the measure if you're a Dominican or
straight partisan commitment there. Did you see that? Just
exactly.
That's right.
Right. So the
Exactly.
idea here, for people who are listening, let me read it. The idea is that even if Adam had not sinned, Christ would be incarnated and glorified among the elect. So yeah.
So what can we say about this? We can't see directly into the mind of God, and what God's reasons were, other than we know that they're for the good. Everything in Scripture that we read about the incarnation is that it's a rescue operation for original sin, and so given what we have to go on from Scripture, the only thing that we can say is that Christ becomes incarnate as a result of original sin. So it's a Felix culpa kind of deal. So I wouldn't agree with the Franciscan school there, and there might be a hint of modal collapse in the Franciscan outlook. But I'll just leave that dangle in there and get on to the logic.
Yeah, let them deal with that mess as we've dealt with a million times.
You
So
don't want to get this audience going on modal collapse, right?
Oh man, I think I did an inventory last time. I think I have at least like 10 substantive either posts or dialogues on modal collapse. It's a thing that just keeps coming up again and again and again.
Well,
anyway.
Logic. So I agree with what Jim says, that by and large you don't really need an awful lot of modern logic. If by modern we mean by symbolic mathematical logic. But I will say this: mastery of the Aristotelian logic is enough for argumentation in philosophy, and really what that just regiments is just a kind of intuitive awareness of argumentation anyway, which you get when you read good philosophy. When it comes to modern symbolic logic, I will say that in proving the sequence, and this is how you do it, you just learn how to do the different proofs, and then you prove it on a sequence. You do get adept at spotting modus ponens, modus tollens, the different, the veil elimination and addition, all that. You do become adept at that, and you can see that a wee bit easier. And I will say that truth tables have a kind of a use to them. But I think that that's only because truth tables, kind of came in out of a different context, to kind of see just the consistency of something, in what cases were the different components, come up true or false. Does the thing always come up true? Yeah. I think that has some sort of use to it. But the sort of myriad of, symbolic manipulation that, modern logicians get themselves into, it's a field of its own, and I don't think it really has any impact on, systematic philosophy.
Right. I'll say this is, I see the world in terms of modus ponens, modus tollens. Right? Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's a kind of a good way to be around the world. Okay.
Yeah.
But also when I teach logic now, actually I have a colleague and I wrote a logic textbook that we just use in house. Right. Mm. And, I've quit using the second half of it where we do the modern logic stuff, and we're rewriting it where it's all just substitution instances where we teach you a form, modus ponens, and we just look at like ever broader instances of modus ponens, right? And then do the same with modus tollens, or even like a truth tree method. I think it's very good that way, because I think what modern logic does get you good at is seeing substitution instances of logical forms, right? And that's what's going to let you actually. That's going to help you read texts, right? When you can spot the strategy like that. And also, I'll say this is the truth table I find is interesting in terms of getting people to start thinking about things in terms of possible worlds. Okay, because I talk about the rows all being possible worlds, right? Now, which may or may not be a good thing, but it does start to raise this issue of like counterfactuals and stuff like that, which is otherwise sort of difficult to get young people to think about, right? Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Rock on. All right. Satisfied with that one. Let us move on. Next question is, what are your concerns with neoclassical theism?
New classical theism.
Neoclassical theism. So yes, many, right? Yeah, many. Also called theistic personalism, but I understand that that's sometimes considered a pejorative. I don't mean it as a pejorative, but I think that some in that camp take it that way. But Jim has a mug that says "Open theists are quitters." I absolutely love it. Right?
My students gave that to me after one of my students gave it to me after I last taught natural theology.
Right.
Because when open theism came up, I said it's just quitting. Right. It's like, oh, it turns out divine simplicity is a problem. No one must
Right.
have thought of that before. Let's just quit.
Yeah, and let's just make God not God anymore.
Yeah,
essentially,
I
right?
mean,
But that's a cartoon critique, but
yeah,
it's
like as
I
if
like
the
that
first
too.
people to notice that, oh yeah, it would seem that like the Old Testament God changes his mind, and that's hard to square with classical theism. Like no one thought of that till Plantinga, right? I mean, like there's not like there's not a history of 1,000 years of people working on that problem, and we're just,
Right.
but we
So-
latecomers must know it's insoluble, right?
Yeah. Let me
Yeah.
get a few opening remarks. Gavin and I have had many conversations on this, and I would encourage everybody to peruse the backlog there, because it's quite vast. I will say a couple things. One is, it seems to my mind to often get the order of procedure wrong, whereas you look to Scripture to get your metaphysics. I don't think that that's right at all. And I think as soon as you start trying to do that, you'll find that knife cuts in multiple directions, my friends, right? So always going to just be messy in that. Rather, you do your metaphysics and you realize, to my mind, it's just classical theism or bust. And then you harmonize with Scripture. And there's going to be some data that's very compatible with it. And there's going to be some data that we need to work with. No big deal. We do that all the time, right? Then my other issue is, I think it's a metaphysical mess on multiple levels, and any problems it hopes to solve or pretends to solve, it doesn't actually solve them. It just pushes them in a different direction in various ways. So modal collapse doesn't solve that, just moves it in a different direction. Classical theism solves that, and it's much leaner in its commitments. It's a much simpler theory. Or take like Molinism for something like that. I don't think Molinism, even if it were true, actually, can you be a classical theist and a Molinist? Maybe. Most Molinists I know are not classical theists. But regardless, I think Molinism is one of those theories that doesn't actually solve the issues that it hopes to solve at the end of the day. It just kind of puts them temporarily out of view. But if you keep pushing it long enough, they come right back. They come right back in sight, right?
You end up like oddly Pelagian, right?
Yeah, or it's like if your issue is, why did God create anybody knowing they would go to hell? Molinism doesn't solve that issue, right? It does not solve that issue, right? There's other things that do solve that issue and have and are leaner commitments. So those would be my three things. One is, it gets the procedure wrong, it's a metaphysical mess, and it doesn't actually solve the issues that I think its proponents think that it solves. It just maybe temporarily puts them out of view. Those would be my three main points, right? I'll let you guys chime in.
I suppose what I would want to say is, first of all, it's to reiterate Jim's point, is that there have been no new or novel objections to classical theism since, the high point, I would say, of scholasticism. I think that the scholastics in the classical theisms that they articulate have articulated systems which have either addressed every objection that has come up to classical theism, or they have the resources to address variations on a theme of objections they have already addressed. And I've never seen any new objection, just they're all variations on a theme that go way back and have always been there. And so I think that's one issue. There's also a kind of, I suppose you would call it a philosophical sociological issue, is that I just don't like the sometimes the aggression, and I'll just say it, the aggression with which people put these objections, as if, they sound a wee bit like Bertrand Russell and the early analytic philosophers parading their new logic as if there were no other logic.
That was my,
And that kind of bothers me, because I don't know, I kind of just still feel that there should be there should be less aggression about such discussions and less bite to them, and they should be going on at the peer-reviewed academic sort of level. But for some reason, they've just become so aggressive and so much bite, and I just don't like that in any philosophical discussion. I don't think that advances anything. But that's on a sociological issue. On a philosophical issue, I think, first of all, there's the rejection of divine simplicity, and I think there's good philosophical reasons for that. Second one is your problem, Pat, is that there seems to be the favoring of the Bible for the metaphysics rather than doing the metaphysics independently. And I think I detect a bit of distrust in, metaphysical argumentation from them. So third, along with divine simplicity, there's the rejection of the other, sort of divine attributes that follow from that, such as mutability, eternity, and all that. But then fourth, something that came to my mind recently, is that divine simplicity is affirmed canonically in two ecumenical councils of the Church, which is the Fourth Lateran Council and the First Vatican Council, explicitly in the canons. So
the three of us ain't getting out of it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
A good thing, because I don't want to be. In fact, it's one of those things that I guess cuts in multiple directions, where people, I guess, see that as, I don't know, a cost to Catholicism. I saw it as God guiding his church to the truth, right?
Yeah.
Because I had independently come to see that, it's like, if I'm going to be a theist, I got to be a classical theist. Like divine simplicity, it's a package deal, my friends, right? This is how we reduce brute facts to zero, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm after, right? I want to bring the number of brute facts. Sorry, Swinburne, not good enough. I want to bring the brute facts down to zero. And to my mind, the only way to do that is to be a classical theist, right? Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to kind of keep, it's not entirely sociological, but I find myself getting a little curious when you'll see someone who's into classic or into neoclassical theism to open theism and say, given what says, especially the biblically based version of it, right? Given what's going on in the Bible, we've got God changing his mind and all this sort of thing. So therefore the metaphysics have to be adjusted to accommodate that, right? Well, then why aren't you a 6-day creationist then?
Why doesn't God have legs?
Yeah. Why doesn't? Yeah, he does walk around, but like, why aren't you a 6-day creationist, right? Because then you're asking me, like, the 6-day creationist is saying, hey, take a fallible scientific view, okay, which one I actually accept, but take a fallible scientific view, and we're going to give that deference, but we're not going to give a logical demonstration deference when it comes to classical theism. Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
It's sort of a very strange. So I think if you're going to consistently do this, right, if you're going to say, I have to take God changing his mind literally, right, in the Old Testament, just using that example, then I don't, and then therefore alter the metaphysics, then why am I altering my reading of the Bible in favor of a fallible, adjustable scientific view, right? That doesn't seem to make any sense. I find it a little annoying because it's kind of this buffet literalism that's moving this, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good stuff. Good question. And like I said, we have an enormous back catalog. If you just want to spend hours and hours of hearing Gavin and I go through the various objections that have been lodged against classical theism, including biblical objections, modal collapse, contingent knowledge, all of it. We've spent much time on all of this stuff. And all right, sorry, scrolling back up. Lots of good stuff. Great discussion today, guys. Keep it. By the way, if either of you two see something pop up in the chat that grabs your eye, we obviously won't have enough time to get through all of them. In fact, I know, Gavin, you have a time limit, so maybe I should just let you guys pick whatever. Let the guests have the honor at this point. Why don't you guys just pick what interests you, and we'll just.
There was one, and I'm going to drag us back into the meaning thing, where someone said so. You like, as an objection to what I was claiming is that you can't say like a rapist and a good husband can come to the same end at the grave, right? To say if you say like if it all just ends at your death, right? Then the rapist and the good husband both, I can't find the exact objection, get the same reward.
Something
but
like that,
no, they don't. Like if I get my wife, I get a good life, right? Whereas the rapist gets a life of privation and all that. Now maybe he doesn't know the difference, okay, but it's sort of the when people when and I don't want to get into the actual issue here. People were getting upset about the Pope allowing divorced Catholics to take communion or something like that. I would have friends say, "Well, okay, where's my trophy wife and all that?" I'm like, no, my reward is this great marriage I have, right? Like my reward is these goods that I've stuck to, right? So I do think I could say I was better rewarded, even if it all ends at the grave. I could still say I was better rewarded than the perfectly unjust man, because justice is intrinsically valuable, right? Do you see my point? Like I don't think we need afterlife rewards to say one of these lives was actually happier.
Jim, we gave you the last word on the previous discussion, but this
Yeah,
seems
no,
like a
please,
new
yeah,
discussion.
do it.
We just reopened the can of worms.
Yeah.
By the way, Jim, everything you say, I agree with a lot of that.
I don't think any of us would
No,
disagree. You know, on
I
the
think
rapist husband case. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So okay. But now we're talking about reward.
Yeah, I know.
So reward, I don't think, and it's interesting that if we don't have the ultimate, end, the good, we have to then sort of track the meaningfulness of life on the basis of reward. So we're tracking it on the basis of rewards which can accrue to me, but those rewards, it seems to me, aren't significant in themselves unless you already have an account of what makes a life worth living. For which I think you need teleology and an ultimate end.
One other thing, I just want to make a quick note on this, because I
agree to give an account of it, but not to live it.
It seems to me to live it, you have to borrow from the account. Same as our atheist friends, they can live the good life because they are borrowing from a fully fledged account.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with that. It's just I don't think it has to be made explicit in order to practically have it.
Okay, so it doesn't need to be made explicit. So it's McDowellian then. It's tacit.
I'm not denying that for a second. Right? Do you see what I mean? And that's why I would say, like, the archangel, besides being weird, an angel in an atheist universe, but like the archangel would be telling me something contrapossible, right? Yeah, it would be unfathomable to me. Okay, but I don't think it would then change value of the things that I had been involved with before.
Isn't that because what the archangel is saying is just impossible?
I think I don't. So here's where we disagree. Is I would say it's not because it's impossible. It's because I don't need the theoretical account to enjoy the goods.
Well, then, how are the goods imbued with rationality?
Well, they are all along. It's just a question of whether or not I've pulled it up, right?
Yeah. So if the archangel says to you, this whole classical theism is all just wrong, then the whole meaningfulness of your life, the rationality of that, is irrational. It's completely false. And so the rationality wasn't embedded there all along. You were borrowing from some falsehood.
Yeah. Or at least I would be left without an account of it, right? It would be a mystery.
It would be easier. Yeah, it would be easier for me, Jim, to go all the way with you if the archangel just like knocked out most of my brain, where I couldn't do the philosophy anymore, and I was sort of agnostic,
sure.
Right? You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Versus if it was somehow made clear to me, not that I'm just agnostic and I don't know, but I see that these things aren't the case, right?
Yeah.
That significantly changes how I would think about it, right? And in the former case, I think I'd be strongly in line with you. In the latter case, I can't even wrap my head around it for, I think, a lot of the reasons that Gavin's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the contrapossibility thing, right?
Yeah. Right. I think maybe, Jim, if the angel Gabriel appeared to me and said all that, I would just say, yeah, right. Get yourself on.
I know who you really are.
No, I agree. It's just a device to say, like, just for some reason, let's suppose you became convinced that you were wrong on the metaphysical side, right? Mm-hmm. I doubt either one of you guys would leave your wives.
No, we wouldn't leave our wives, but we would have to reevaluate the whole meaning and significance, why that is meaningful and significant.
Yeah. But see, I just don't think I need to know why it's meaningful and significant for it to be meaningful and significant.
See, for me, my whole life would be so radically altered and collapse in so many ways that, maybe I wouldn't immediately leave my wife or kids, right? But so much of how I see the world, how it's anchored in meaning, how things are made explicit and intelligible to me, that has brought me to actually being from a pretty crappy kind of secular husband to living, I think, a fully sacramental marriage now. If all that was just wiped out, I'm not going to be like, all right, let's go down to the local college bar, not immediately. But like, how is my life going to look if I haven't thrown myself off a bridge like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I don't know, but I imagine it's going to be radically different. Maybe I will have left my wife at that point, right? Now that sounds really bad, right? Initially, but I'm trying to be really honest about it, right? How that would affect me psychologically if I were somehow convinced of that situation. I can't.
Okay, so
you see what I'm saying, right?
What if it were okay, you still get an afterlife, right? But there's no God. I know this doesn't make any sense. Yeah, but there's
So this is interesting because somebody asked me, you know, if let's say if Catholicism weren't true, somebody says, you know, Christ didn't exist, Catholicism isn't true, you know, kind of what would you do? Where would you go? And I was sort of thinking I would probably end up as some kind of Neoplatonist.
That's exactly what I've said before, Gavin. I'd probably be just like a broad Neoplatonist.
So I guess what I'm trying to get at is does this all hinge for you guys on that there's an afterlife, or is it hinge just that there is a summum bonum that is God?
Well, let me answer that.
The second one there, there is a summum bonum that is God.
Second one before, but I think the second one predicts independently an afterlife because of how I think of communal justice, not just individual justice.
Yeah, well, so I'm not talking about justice. I'm just talking about like whether or not I can like value my life, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so look, I'll agree with you because the summum bonum, the good, is said in many ways, right? 100%. I think a meaningful life. This might be trivial though, right? A meaningful life is a life that is lived for the sake of the good life, right? For the good. I agree with you on that. Okay. What I doubt though is like let's say if indeed you can convince me there's no afterlife, so that I am finite, full stop. I don't think my finitude would make that life in the summum bonum that I'm striving for any less valuable.
We agree with that because there's still a summum bonum. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. You know what I mean? Okay. Or
that's because,
go ahead, please.
That's because you still have the summum bonum, even if you don't have an afterlife.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I will agree that any rational actor, there is a highest good implicit in what they're doing. Yep. 100%. Okay. However, one, I don't think you need a theoretical account of it to enjoy it. Right. Though I think you may be better off. Right. Okay. And two, I don't think it has to be hooked to a story about individual immortality. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not saying it isn't a better story with individual mortality, right? Mm-hmm. Or it makes better sense. I don't think it's hooked to individual immortality, right?
I think with the summum bonum there, that, if the summum bonum is necessary for a meaningful life, I think that's enough to get us across the line to agreement.
Book one of the Aristotle's Ethics, bang, right? I'm with you all the way, right?
Yeah.
Right. But so here's why I think this is, again, I know like Pat and I claim not to involve ourselves in apologetics, but then we do it all the time. I think that's important apologetically, okay? Because it's cutting out the you just believe this because you're afraid of dying.
Right.
My mortality in terms of my finitude, I don't think makes a damn difference, right? To my happiness right now.
Well, yeah, and dude, let's be honest. Like, death, just because God exists, isn't necessarily a plus, right?
Yeah, and also, there's the punishment thing. But go read Spe Salve, where Pope Benedict says, so we're talking about timeless existence here. What does it even mean to look forward to that, mortal? Right? Okay, you know what I mean? So and so for me, I think it's very important to decouple for apologetical reasons. And I think just for understanding like what's really important in your life, what I would see is a kind of childish clinging to this idea of immortality as being me going on in this form 100%, right? Okay.
Right,
Even if I do, right? Yeah. From what is most important in life.
Right.
And what is important in life is not Jim Madden's survival, right? It's the things Jim loves, and that constitutes the good life, right? Yeah. Okay, so let me put it better ways. If the angel Gabriel said, "Hey, tomorrow, sorry, Jim, turns out you're gonna have to be like a Old Testament Jew, right? You die, you're gone, you're over, right? But you still serve God along the way. You still serve the highest good. I don't think that really bothers me very much at all.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Or it doesn't change what I do.
But Jim, just to kind of test your intuitions here, if the angel Gabriel appeared to you and said there is no summum bonum.
Yeah.
Would that change everything?
Yeah. So then at that point, I'm gonna like almost for like Wittgensteinian reasons say we've just quit making sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
my point. Yeah. That would be
I'm with
Look
you
at
on
that. Look at that philosophical progress.
Boom.
The
dialectic just turned, right?
It can actually happen.
Yeah.
Look at that. Yeah.
No. This is one of the things we had that great. The three of us throw down about miracles and resurrection at one time.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
that is a great example of how you do this. Yeah.
These are my favorite parts of these conversations, not just answering questions, but when we have really good clash and then there's boom, convergence. And no, that's awesome. I'm very satisfied.
What
with
is
that,
the philosophical question? What is the philosophical question? What's the summa bonum?
And Jim, I agree about your point strongly about apologetically. It's kind of just there's just so much cheapness that goes on popular level apologetics.
And I would even say
unhelpful,
as a matter of like spiritual maturity, even.
I agree.
Yeah.
And now when it comes to an afterlife for me, aside from just revelation and philosophical considerations, I just think that when, I'm of the position that we have strong enough moral expectations of God as subsistent goodness to independently predict an afterlife, right? To me, it just sort of flows out of my hypothesis of the perfect good standing at the foundation of reality, independent of everything else that we're talking about here, right? But I think we're actually all kind of on the same page now. So cool. All right, why don't you guys see what other Gavin? How about you pick one?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've dominated too much this. I'm sorry, Gavin.
It's good. No, that was good.
Come to us all the way from Ireland. Look what I've done.
I saw a good question on Kant and existence not being a predicate. Which might be a nice one to tackle.
I saw that one. Let's see if I can find it.
Yeah.
Thomistic Disputations wants to know. I think. Oh wait, never mind. It was the one before this, but it's by Thomistic Disputations. But anyways, the question was, here it is. What do you think of Kant's argument that existence is not a predicate, and how atheists use that against the deity?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I should answer this since Thomistic Disputations spelled my name wrong, but so we'll not do that again. No, we'll be kind to Thomistic Disputations. Yeah. So Kant's argument conclusion that existence is not a predicate. Okay, so Kant reasons then that existence is not a predicate of things like, some sort of, magnitude or quality or whatever of the thing. It's just the presenting of the thing there whole and complete in itself, between, 100 non-existing dollars and 100 existing dollars, there's no real difference. So one is just the positing of the thing there and the other isn't. And then that's, developed, by Frege and others such that existence is a second order property, applicable of first order properties, applicable of things. My argument is that, what about those things? Those things that have first order properties, do they exist? And well, if they exist and they're not identical to their existence, that seems like a property. It's not, those qualitative sort of properties, that they're typical first order properties, but existence is what gets you the thing there in the first place, of which you can predicate first order property.
It is. I'm with Barry Miller. I think it's a first order predicate applicable to concrete individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, does Gavin, I've never been to the Emerald Isle, but I'm willing to assume 100 possible dollars will not buy you a drink in Dublin.
No, not at all.
Right. Okay. And so there's a real difference then.
Yeah.
You see my point, right?
Yeah. And I think that's Thomas's point, and I mean, everybody who does kind of real metaphysics, let's say, they recognize that the being of things is at stake here. And there's an interesting sort of question about the being of things, because as you say, 100 possible dollars isn't going to get you a drink. $100 may not. 100 actual dollars may not either, but that's a different story.
Right.
And
I mean, interesting. Hegel goes off on this against Kant in the Encyclopedia of Logic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like, what do you mean? Like, no, I mean, of course it makes a difference because it's Aristotle's argument against Plato is there's causal relations here that make it right.
Yeah.
Something that I've always done with Kant, especially in the context of the ontological argument, is even if existence isn't a predicate, necessary existence is. There's a big difference between necessarily existing $100 and possibly existing $100. And necessarily existing $100 are in my pocket, right, or someone's pocket. You know what I mean? Right.
Yeah.
Right. There's So yeah, if you want to just say it's a property of concepts expressed by the existential quantifier, right? That there is an X such that X is an F, right? The whole idea of of just property instantiation, right? This always presupposes existence, right?
That there is something which instantiates.
Right. So that's the fundamental issue. Like whatever's presupposing this thing, it can't explain it, right? So it's just it just seems so confused on a very fundamental level. I'll borrow from Turner Nevitt, right? If you take the statement planets exist, and now you consider Vulcan, which was the mistaken planet, right? Then we can ask, does Vulcan instantiate the property of being a planet, right? Well, if so, then the analysis of existence in terms of property instantiation is mistaken because it does not, in fact, exist, right? So it's instantiating the property of being a planet does not show that planets exist. But if Vulcan does not instantiate the property of being a planet, of course, that can only be because it does not, in fact, exist, right? Which shows that the existence is presupposed by property instantiation rather than being explained by it.
Yeah. And that was more or less the argument I made in chapter 3 of Aquinas' Way to God, that there's something about the thing which instantiates these properties that we need to tackle.
Right. Excellent. Yes. So good. Yeah. Good question. All right. Let's keep moving on here. Guys, if something's jumping out to you grab it, or else I'm just going to pull one up here.
There's somebody asked about becoming a Dominican.
Let's do it. Because Gavin is a lay Dominican.
Yeah, the Nick Rocks.
Nicky says, kind of off topic, but for Gavin, I'm thinking of becoming a lay Dominican. What should I expect in the process?
Well, it's good to answer these sorts of questions. You know, it allows the philosophy to kind of simmer away. So in becoming a lay Dominican, generally the process is the same everywhere else. First of all, you have to find a chapter that you attach yourself to, and you have to start attending the chapter. You're something of a postulant at that point, or an aspirant. In being an aspirant, then you attend the chapter for so long, and then you're invited if you would like to become a novice. So basically, first of all, you know, you're this aspirant and you attend usually for 6 months, and then you're invited to become a novice. If you're going to become a novice, then you enter your novitiate, and your novitiate lasts for about a year. And just like, you know, the brothers and the nuns, novitiates can be different in different places, especially with lay Dominican chapters. So usually part of your novitiate, there's some sort of intellectual formation, there's spiritual formation. Although, you know, Dominican spirituality, you can ask me about that. It's crazy sort of stuff. Because there is nothing to it. There is no Dominican spirituality except just by being Dominican. But yeah, so you enter the novitiate, you develop your spirituality, your closeness with God, the various, you know, things that we do, like the divine office, rosary, mass, and all of that. And then by the end of your novitiate, if you're prepared, so you've been received, you're a novitiate. If you're prepared to make profession, you can make simple profession for 3 years, and then you make solemn profession for life. And you make profession to the master of the order, or to the master of the order's representative, which is usually the provincial for your province, or somebody delegated by the provincial. Yeah, and these are promises. These are weighty promises that are made, which commit you to a particular charism, which, because it's a charism of a religious order, is known to bring about sanctity in the individual who follows that charism. So it's just because it's a lay branch, or it's the third order Dominicans, doesn't mean that it doesn't incur the responsibility to live by the charism. So the charism to preach, okay, is a known charism which will make saints out of people. Now, not everybody has the charism to preach, so people can be made saints without the charism to preach. But no genuine Dominican is a Dominican saint unless he or she has lived that charism to preach. That's what makes them a Dominican.
And there's a vow. I didn't realize there's a final vow.
Yeah, well, it's profession. It's not quite a vow, because we don't take on the evangelical counsels of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But there is a profession that is made. It's a promise that is made, and so it is binding on the lay Dominican.
Sure.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Just,
Did not know that.
Scrolling through here, we've really roused a good discussion with our talk on nihilism and all that stuff. Here, I'm just going to pull this one up. Don wants to know, does God know counterfactuals, how I would act in other circumstances? If so, how is the knowledge grounded? how are we to understand Christ saying things like Tyre and Sidon would have repented? So he's asking about counterfactuals of creaturely freedom, which ties into Molinism. And I want to say there's nothing to know, right? So my position is that God knows a free act in bringing it about. Yeah. Right. There's just nothing to know until the free act is made. And God's going to know that by being the cause of it. Right. So if you want the position that I take, that I think actually handles all the issues of free will and predestination beautifully well, I would supplement it with a couple different accounts. I would head right to Matthew Grant's book, Gaven, which I know you've read, of Human Freedom and Divine Universal Causality. It's got a powerful critique of Molinism there. Not just metaphysically in and of itself, but also showing how Molinism doesn't really solve the problems that it's trying to solve. And then Matthews Grant gives a beautiful development of a model of classical theism, refutes determinism, shows how divine simplicity supports a libertarian conception of free will with divine. The book is a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. So I would point you in that direction. But yeah, I just don't think God has middle knowledge, because I don't think that there's anything to know unless God is already actively bringing about that free decision.
So, I think that's all great. I'll just add a few wee things to that. The first thing is I'm going to recommend this book by Simo Nutila, Modalities in Medieval Philosophy, and that'll kind of give you a sort of an overview of what exactly the standing of counterfactuals are. So possibles that could be, and what Aquinas' commitment was to modality, because it's not what you might think it is, given the way, discussions go, and not all medieval thinkers, especially not Aquinas or Scotus, would have agreed on the intelligibility of counterfactuals and, sort of possibilities. So that's just one thing in the background. Now, how does God know possibilities? Because counterfactuals are possibilities that could be, but are not. How does he know them? By his knowledge of his own essence. Okay, so he has a direct sort of understanding of his essence, and in understanding the divine essence, he understands everything that could be understood. In understanding that, he understands what is subject to his power. So he understands what does exist as subject to his power, including all the actions of free creatures, and he understands what is not so subject to his power, i.e. what does not exist. And so with that in place, then we go down Pat's route. There is nothing to understand there, because a free action of a creature were to occur would occur because God causes it to occur. So the real problem isn't that God's understanding of counterfactuals. It's preserving the freedom of free creatures while still having God cause those free acts. That's where the problem is. Right. Not with God's knowledge of counterfactuals.
And not only that, but it just posits something unnecessary, because for God to have robust providence, we already have everything we need. God knows all possibilities of being and knowing himself, and all actualities of being and being its cause, right? And that's it. You don't need middle knowledge, right? Something like that. Jim, any thoughts on Molinism?
No, nothing to add. I had my Molinist phase.
it was brief-lived, right? Yeah. It's interesting to see how it's kind of like come back in popularity, especially among many different Protestant thinkers, right? But yeah, one of my major things is I just don't, even if I thought it was metaphysically tenable, I just don't actually think it solves the issues that it hopes to solve, right?
I think for me, Molinism, it was just so cool. Like it was this elaborate logical apparatus, and so. But yeah.
Well, that's how Norris Clark describes it. He says it's logically beautiful, but metaphysically absurd.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
I'm like,
exactly.
Nailed it. That's perfect. Yeah. Right. All right. We got to wrap up here. So, who wants dibs on the last question? One of you guys pick one more to finish up with.
I'm good to go.
You go ahead, Jim. I
haven't seen one that wouldn't just take us back into the other mix.
Well, let's finish with this then. I know there's still tons of stuff here, so guys, I appreciate the chat. What's we kind of already talked about at the beginning stuff we're working on, but are any other projects you guys want to mention, or stuff that's coming down the pipeline? Maybe we could set the tee something up for a future conversation. So Gavin, why don't you go first?
So I mentioned my classical theism book, 60,000 words in, thank God, and I'm breaking this sort of real sticking sort of point, and the rest of it's going to flow through. So that's going along. I've got an article to kind of not throw together, but to bring together based on a talk I give on the First Vatican Council on faith. So it was a conference we had. It's probably up online in our college website, and I gave the talk on faith at it. And I think they're being brought together and published as proceedings. So I just have to polish off that article on faith, because the First Vatican Council's, discussion of faith is really just Thomistic through and through. So it gives me a nice wee sort of springboard to talk about Aquinas' notion of faith. And other than that, I'm taking a long, deep dive into Hegel. I've put him off for too long.
Nice.
So I'd read bits and pieces, and I read Brandon's Marquette lecture. So I've got Taylor's book down. I'm going to go to Robert Pippin. I've got the Science of Logic. I've got the Phenomenology. Yeah, I'm going to come to terms with
best
Hegel.
introduction to the logic,
Yeah.
and maybe to Hegel overall for a thin volume.
Yeah.
Harnack, Introduction to Hegel's Logic by
All right.
Hackett. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have a
Good.
UK edition too, so I suspect you'd be able to get your hands on it pretty easily. Yeah. Harnack.
Awesome.
I mean, very, very good. Very, very good.
Mhm.
And it's maybe a 120-page volume. So it's sort of
Yeah.
kind of a single sitting. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I am for the time being. Semester's about to start. I've got several PhD students. I'm just going to get plunged into work. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
busy time.
Excellent, Jim. Any final announcements?
If so, I'm going to be writing up a piece on philosophy of technology and nihilism stuff for our friend of the show, Stephen DeLay, for his 316 volume is going to come off Whiff and Stock. So that's coming up. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with this yet. Is I really want to do something big on panpsychism. Okay, varieties of panpsychism and why more people are panpsychists than you think they are, right? And but I haven't decided if that's going to be a scholarly piece. It's going to be a series of like Substack blogs or something else. But that's kind of where I'm going right now.
Get on the
And,
Substack.
yeah, and I am told that the new book is progressing through the editorial process. So hopefully that'll be out and about soon.
Beautiful. All right. Well, quick reminder before we go. I am starting the new YouTube channel where we'll begin phasing these philosophical conversations over there, because YouTube is mean and they kill you with the algorithm if you just have different content. So I dropped the link there. It's going to be called Philosophy for the People. And there's not a lot there now, but if you guys could just go subscribe and just comment on whatever's there and help build that channel up. Like, look, I'm too busy. I'm too fat. I'm too old to do marketing anymore. If this channel is going to be a thing, it's
up
on
to
you
you
guys,
people.
right?
Yeah.
It's up to you people, right? So if this is valuable to you, you want to support this, go subscribe, share it, comment here and there. I just got too much. I'm just not going to market it, like straight up. I just got too much going on. I don't make this. Isn't what pays the bills. This stuff.
And,
so
and if you want it to stay on YouTube, don't say Ivor Mactum. Oh wait,
there it
Oh,
goes.
just-
Boom, crushed.
I meant horse tranquilizers.
Right. So that's in the comments, and people can subscribe, comment, and gentlemen, thank you so much. Appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Adios.
Thank you.
Thank you.